essence were the same thing, there'd be no necessity for science. The whole purpose of science is to see the difference between appearance and essence. In other words, the universe is crazy. In fact, it is crazier than we can even imagine. Who would have thought we would have quantum mechanics? Who would have thought we could have dead cats and live cats existing simultaneously? Who would have thought that you could be in many places at the same time? That's called craziness. It's also called modern physics.
Yeah, well, I think it's those big questions. Theoretical physicists seem to come up against those throughout their entire careers.
That's why I became a theoretical physicist. I wanted to bump up against those big questions.
Constantly. And so that's another question I was really interested in, is that I've heard that the majority of theoretical physicists are incredibly spiritual and have a great appreciation for the concept of consciousness and the soul and the universe and where it came from, because these are the questions that they're constantly asking. For yourself, what's your view on life, and where is it? What are we doing when we teleport life, if we ever get to that point?
Well, if I knew the answer to life, I would have an inside track up there.
Right. As would anybody, yeah.
But let me tell you how we physicists view things, right? For example, Einstein was asked the big question, is there a God? Is there a meaning to everything, right?
Right.
And here's how Einstein answered the question. He said, there really are two kinds of gods. We have to be very scientific. We have to define what you mean by God. If God is the God of intervention, the personal God, the God of prayer, the God that parts the waters, then he had a hard time believing in that. Would God listen to all our prayers for a bicycle for Christmas and smite the Philistines for me, please?
Right.
He didn't think so. However, he believed in the God of order, harmony, beauty, simplicity, and elegance, the God of Spinoza. That's the God that he believed in, because he thought the universe was so gorgeous. It didn't have to be that way. It could have been chaotic. It could have been ugly, messy. But here we have the fact that all the equations of physics can be placed on a simple sheet of paper.
Right.
Einstein's equation is only 1 inch long. And the quantum theory is about a yard long, but you can squeeze it onto a sheet of paper.
Right, with a small enough font. No.
Right. And with string theory, you could even put those two equations together. And string theory can be squeezed into an equation 1 inch long. And that equation, by the way, is my equation. That's string field theory. That's my contribution.
Right.
But we want to know, well, where did that equation come from? This is what Einstein asked. Did God have a choice? Was there any choice in building a universe? When he woke up in the morning, he would say, I'm going to create a universe. I'm going to be God today. What kind of universe would I create? This is how he created much of his theories.
To make science interesting for people. First of all, we are born scientists. When we're born, we wonder what's out there. We begin to wonder about the sun, life, the stars, what makes the oceans, the weather. We're born scientists. And then something happens. When we hit the danger years of junior high school and high school, that's when it's literally crushed out of us.
Those are the worst.
Every little flower of curiosity, said Einstein, is crushed by society itself. Because we have to learn all these facts, figures, memorization. We think that memorization is science. And that's not true at all. My daughter had to take the Regents exam once, and she had to memorize all these facts and figures about minerals, crystals for a geology exam. Nowhere did I see the true driving force of geology, which is continental drift. That's the organizing principle for all of geology. And yet the exam was memorizing all the names of the crystals and the minerals. And then later she comes up to me and says, Daddy, why would anyone want to become a scientist? That was the most humiliating event in my entire life. I felt like taking that book and ripping it apart, because that exam was crushing curiosity right out of the next generation. And then we wonder, hey, how come people are not more interested in science? Duh.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Sanford, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Michio Kaku. Thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Kirsten.
It's wonderful to have a physicist and a science educator such as yourself here to be able to speak with me. You are on a book tour right now. you've written a book, The Physics of the Impossible, which is really exciting and very interesting. What was it that kind of drew you? I mean, you write physics texts and you write popular books about physics.
Well, when I was a child, I had two childhood heroes. The first was Albert Einstein. When he died, everyone was talking about the death of the greatest scientist of the age. But everyone said that he didn't finish his masterpiece, the unified field theory, the theory of everything. I was a child. I was fascinated by this story. And I said to myself, I want to be part of that quest to finish what the greatest scientists of our age could not finish, the theory of everything. But I had a second hero, too. I used to watch Flash Gordon on TV. I was like glued to the TV set. But you know, after a while, you learn the facts of life. I didn't have blonde hair. I didn't have muscles.
Right.
And I said to myself, now wait a minute. It's the scientist that makes the series work. It's Dr. Zarkov. He invents the starship. He invents the ray guns. He invents the city in the sky, right?
Right.
Without Dr. Zarkov, there's no Flash Gordon. Without science, there's no science fiction.
Right.
So I said to myself, when I become a physicist, and I know exactly the boundary between the edge of physics and science fiction, then I'm going to write a book for somebody like me as a kid, wondering about invisibility and teleportation, starships and time travel. Well, now I'm a physicist, so I can write a book like this. And they told me, well, it's impossible that a book like that with physics in the title could hit the New York Times bestseller list.
And now?
And it happened. The impossible happened. It's number 12 on the New York Times bestseller list. So there are a lot of people out there just like me watching Star Wars and Star Trek and Terminator and then wondering, is it possible? Well, this book is for them.
Absolutely. And the question also, you say there's no science fiction without science, but that goes in the reverse also. Science fiction also drives science questions.
That's right. Take a look at Edwin Hubble. He's the greatest astronomer of the 20th century, discovered the expanding universe. But originally he was a lawyer. He was going to be a country lawyer, and that's it. But as a child, he read Jules Verne. And he had a romance of the stars. And he quit being a lawyer, went to graduate school at the University of Chicago, and he was in a rush, a real rush, because he was, much older. And he said, I'm going to make some big breakthroughs, and he made the biggest breakthrough of the 20th century, the expanding universe, which gives us the Big Bang.
Right, and it's led to so many other ideas about how the universe works, the concept of dark matter, dark energy, people looking at how far back time goes and what started everything out.
Gee, this is all the things I do for a living.
Yeah, I know.
That's my day job.
That sounds rough.
When we physicists look in outer space for alien life, we don't look for little green men. We look for type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations. A type 1 civilization has harnessed planetary power. They control earthquakes, the weather, volcanoes. They have cities on the ocean. Anything planetary, they control. That's type 1. A type 2 civilization is stellar. They've exhausted the power of a planet, and they get their energy directly from their mother star. They just don't get a suntan on a weekend. They use solar flares. They use the power of the sun itself to energize their huge machines. Eventually, they exhaust the power of a star, and they go galactic. They harness the power of billions of stars within a galaxy. Now, for example, Buck Rogers would correspond to a type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization. Star Trek and the Federation of Planets, who have colonized a few star systems, would correspond to a type 2 system. And the Empire of Star Wars would correspond to a type 3 civilization. Now, what are we on this scale? We are type 0. We don't even rate on this scale. We get our energy from, not from stars or galaxies, we get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. But we can calculate when we will attain type 1 status, in about 100 years. Now, every time I read the newspaper, I see evidence of this historic transition from type 0 to type 1. And I am privileged to be alive in the most important era in the history of the human race. The transition from type 0 to to type 1. I read the newspaper, and I see evidence of this everywhere. What is the European Union? The European Union has been formed to oppose NAFTA, that is, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But why? Because we're seeing the beginnings of a type 1 economy. Huge planetary trading blocks are the beginnings of a type 1 economy. And what language will this type 1 economy speak? Everywhere I go around the world, I find that the elites all speak English as a second language. In the future, the planet Earth will be like that. Everyone will speak their own native language, but on top of that, there will be a type 1 language, probably English. There's also going to be a type 1 culture and a type 1 political system as well. You can go anywhere on the planet Earth and show people pictures of two individuals that are instantly recognizable by any human: Madonna and Arnold Schwarzenegger. In other words, we're talking about Hollywood movies. We're talking about rock and roll, rap music, blue jeans. That's going to be the planetary culture of the planet Earth. And what is the Internet? The Internet is the beginning of a type 1 telephone system. That's all it is. And so this transition is perhaps the most important transition of all time. Some people don't want it. They fear this transition because this transition is to a planetary civilization tolerant of many cultures. These are the terrorists. In their gut, they fear this because they know they are witnessing the birth pangs of a beginning of a new planetary civilization, and the terrorists want nothing to do with it.
So as of May, we have the beginnings of the actual investigation into the predictions made by string theory.
Right. And then people ask the question, well, how come the Americans aren't doing this? How come the Americans have to knock on the door of the European Union? Because our machine was canceled in 1993.
Yeah, it got under construct. They started constructing it and
Congress gave us $1 billion to dig
yeah.
a hole, and they canceled the machine, gave us a second $1 billion to fill up the hole. $2 billion to dig up a hole and fill it
back up.
Right.
Right.
So why was it canceled? And why do I do this? Why do
Politics.
I speak before people? On the last day of hearings, one Congress would ask a physicist, quote, "Will we find God with your machine? If so, I will vote for it."
Oh my
The
goodness.
poor physicist didn't know what to say. So he
No.
said, we're going to find another subatomic particle. Well, you could hear all the jaws hit the floor.
Everyone, that's it?
And they said,
Yeah.
$11 billion for another god-darn subatomic particle.
Right.
They canceled it the next day. So we physicists, in our minds, over and over and over again, have played that scene.
Yeah.
How should we have answered that question? How should we have justified an $11 billion atom smasher that is now being built in Europe?
Yeah.
I would have said something different. I would have said, God, by whatever signs or symbols you ascribe to the deity, this machine, the super collider, will take us as close as humanly possible to his or her greatest creation, Genesis. This is a Genesis machine.
Wow.
We're going to recreate Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 with this machine. But we didn't know how to answer it, so they canceled the machine. And
Hindsight
now,
is always great, isn't
yeah.
it?
And now we physicists are knocking on the door of the European Union asking permission to get on their atom smasher.
But there are many European scientists who are also doing the same, asking the same questions, and so hopefully they're going to get into it.
Right. It's just that the focus is leaving the United States and it's going to Europe. So that's why I do this.